Hi, welcome to episode 26 of CultureWatch Radio. I'm Andrew Smith, and with me is Bill Muhlenberg. Bill, this corona thing is starting to resemble a modern equivalent of the Ministry of Silly Walks.
Well, Andrew, I think you got it right there. We've had a year and a half now of dealing with this, various governments, some doing their best, but increasingly many looking like they haven't a clue, just making things up as they go along, especially with the so-called health experts giving us contradictory advice, contradicting one another, not even following the science or the medicine, just kind of pulling things out of a hat. Yeah, a lot of strange, magical type solutions being offered here. Numbers, New South Wales talking about 80% full immunity before we get out of lockdown. The idea we can eradicate a virus that we've never done before with any other virus. Locking down entire nations, destroying the economies in the process, suicide rates going out of the roof. There's been a lot of strange responses by governments, and I think hopefully people are starting to say, wait a minute now, are we being taken for a ride here?
Yeah, and they've continually shifted the goalposts. So currently the vaccine is the holy grail. But before that, it was masks.
Yeah, it's one thing after another. Look, there's a place for all these things properly done. I had one fellow complaining about masks altogether, and I said, look, if you're having some open heart surgery and the surgeons just above you might have a little bit of a cough or a sneeze, I'd be very thankful indeed that the surgeons do wear their properly designed surgical masks. But the whole issue of mask wearing for the general public, especially out of doors, I do this often. I'll go walk down the street, absolutely nobody in sight. I got my foolish mask on under these lockdowns. Somebody comes the other way, they got a mask on. They'll actually detour, walk in the middle of the road to avoid me. I feel like shouting, hey, I'm not a leper, you're not going to get whatever I've got if I've got anything. But so yeah, mask madness, Fauci going on about maybe we need 2 or 3 masks at a time.
Yes.
And then there's the whole vaccine thing, which we could also talk about.
Yeah. Masks have, if you really are following the science, masks have actually been shown to be ineffective. In fact, here's a piece from Alan Jones with Dr. Babak Amin.
Dr. Babak Amin is amongst a group of Melbourne doctors disturbingly concerned about the Andrews government's response to coronavirus, in particular to the compulsory wearing of masks. Dr. Amin joins us. Dr. Amin, thank you for your time. I mean, when Andrews says compulsory masks, we're not talking medical masks, are we?
No, Alan, we're not. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. We're talking about cloth masks, non-medical masks with no universal standards for their manufacture. We're talking about masks that, when you look through the medical literature, play no role in stopping the spread of respiratory illnesses, none whatsoever. There is a significant body of evidence from years gone by looking at the role of these cloth masks in community settings with previous pandemics, in particular influenza pandemics of the last decade, because we know that influenza and SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID, have similar modes of transmission. And there is a raft of high-quality data, what we call meta-analyses, studies that compile multiple other studies together. And these meta-analyses have found that non-medical masks in community settings play no role in protecting the wearer from infection or from stopping infected people from passing the infection on.
And Bill, it's worth mentioning that when you have those medical masks that you've seen on TV, when medical professionals who are using them, and they're properly trained on the application and use of them anyway, those masks have a limited time span before they themselves become a source of infection. So they have to be changed over a number of times during a shift. You can't just wear one all day.
Well, and that's exactly what, well, I've been doing it. You've probably been doing it. Most people, right? You wear it, put it back in your pocket or in the glove box of the car or whatever, go out the next day, wear it again. These things cost money for one, and for two, we hate to waste. So yeah, they're not only not proper medical masks, we're using them the wrong way. And it's doing nothing at all to save us from a virus. About the very best it does, it makes us feel good. We think, oh, I'm doing our bit to save grandma and save humanity. But in terms of the science, and that's what keeps bothering me, which is why I like Alan Jones and some of the others on Sky News, they keep hammering away this very thing. These health experts show us the science, show us the medicine, show us the data that you're basing all these bizarre directives on, whether it's lockdown, mandatory masks, and so on. They refuse to actually show us the science. They just seem to make it up as they go along. The politicians hide behind them, and they get away with complete control in the process.
And of course, they'll demand that we follow the science whenever it suits them.
Yes. Well, and again, the science seems to change every day. It seems to conflict. We have, well, as you just heard, this Melbourne renowned expert and many others. I quote quite a few of them in a recent article I wrote on mask mandates. But when we have the science changing all the time and the proposed solutions changing all the time, and even just the foolish rules, right? 5 kilometers today, you can leave your home. Tomorrow you can go 10 kilometers. And in fact, here as we speak, at midnight tonight, Victoria will again change its rules and regulations. So amazing. Now, the corona is so very dangerous right now, but come midnight, it's going to change altogether and it'll be much safer. So I'd like to see some real science instead of people just making things up to keep us all in control.
Well, as it turns out, being outside is exceptionally safe when it comes to COVID transmission. So here's the story by Channel 9 Sydney political reporter Chris O'Keefe.
A beach walk taking the kids to the park, getting a run in around the bay, even lying down in the sun having a cup of coffee or a drink. These photos might not look like Sydney is taking lockdown seriously, but when you look at the science, there has not been one case in New South Wales, even Australia, where someone has caught the virus outdoors.
What we've seen as characteristic of this pandemic is that COVID does not spread very easily outside, particularly if you can maintain that social distancing.
The fresh air disperses and dilutes virus particles, making it very difficult to transmit with any strength, and the liquid droplets that carry COVID evaporate in the outdoors.
There's a lot of fresh air, basically, which means any droplets, aerosols disperse further. But also there's protective factors in air, everything from ozone to hydrogen peroxides.
That's why, regardless of the fears, there was no transmission from Black Lives Matter protests in Australia. And a study of overseas rallies showed very little spread of COVID.
Yeah, so that's the segment of his story that went to air just days ago, really. And I think, Bill, we're seeing signs of freedom overseas.
Well, yes, it's in contrast to what we're seeing overseas. Singapore has decided this idea of eradication strategy, counting cases, is complete silliness. We need to simply live with this virus as we do every other virus we've ever had. England is, of course, opening up. American cities and states are opening up. Even a few Aussie politicians are starting to now talk about, hey, we cannot keep people locked down forever. And yet that video you just played of the, people being harassed for not having a mask in the middle of nowhere. In my piece on mask mandates, I look at a number of these cases, both here and overseas. It's not just the madness of, there's no science, but we have now really COVID police and a police state going along with the health fascism. One of the stories I mentioned was a 12-year-old girl, I believe, up in Sydney or Newcastle, who is pepper sprayed by the police for not having a mask on. The truth is, and in fact, another one, a guy in Northern Territory, simply walking along trying to drink his cup of coffee, obviously a bit hard to do with a mask on. He was arrested by the police as well. Obviously, we got some police who, most do a great job, but we got some who are getting carried away. They're quite happy to take away our most basic of human rights and freedoms. And they're, turning us into a real police state, something we would expect. Communist China, North Korea, but some of the videos, for example, that I share in my recent article, it's quite shocking when you see what's going on. And sadly, but I think it may now finally be producing a bit of a backlash. Most people are saying, wait a minute, enough is enough. This is madness. You're treating somebody without a mask like he's a axe murderer or worse. This is not how we operate in a free society.
Yeah. Bill, it would be fair to say that the goodwill of the Australian people in terms of helping out with what they've been told is a problem is pretty much exhausted. I mean, what's the solution now? Do we now have to really learn our rights so that we can defend ourselves on the spot?
Well, I think after a year and a half of all this madness, people are beginning to wake up. People are beginning to say enough is enough. Sure, in the early days, they were quite happy to comply, do pretty much whatever the state told them to do, no matter how ridiculous, no matter how contradictory, no matter how unscientific. But I think now there is fatigue. We've seen mass demonstrations in parts of Europe, in London, American cities. We haven't seen quite as big these mass protests in Australia, protesting against the lockdown measures. But yeah, you just can't keep doing this forever. People believe there is such thing as freedom, democratic rights, and so on. And when that's taken away for too long, all in the name of keeping us safe or saving grandma, after a while, people get wise and say, wait a minute, enough is enough.
Or as the Nazis would say, it was for your own good.
Yeah, well, they said it. That's right. And we're seeing the same here, and it's getting to be a bit of a worry.
Yeah. As always, more information is available on the Culture Watch website, and we'll see you again next week with another episode of Culture Watch Radio.